Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. Below him, Titan's orange surface stretched out like a frozen desert. The research station looked like a metal spider sitting on the moon's icy ground. Its arms reached out in all directions, connecting different sections with covered walkways. "First time seeing an alien facility?" asked the pilot, a gruff man named Bill Turner. "Yeah," Jake said. He was 19 and had never been this far from Earth. "It's bigger than I thought. Wait until you see the inside." The Velkari built this place to make everyone feel small. Jake had heard stories about the Velkari. They were tall, gray-skinned aliens with sharp teeth and glowing red eyes. They had been running military academies across the galaxy for over 200 years. Humans had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago, and most aliens still thought of them as weak newcomers. The transport ship landed with a soft thud. Jake grabbed his bag and followed the other new cadets off the ship. The station's artificial gravity felt normal, but the air tasted metallic. Emergency lights blinked along the walls, casting red shadows everywhere. "Welcome to hell," muttered another human cadet as they walked through the entrance. The boy looked about Jake's age with sandy hair and nervous eyes. "I'm Ryan Cooper. You must be Jake Morrison. How did you know?" "There are only 6 humans in this batch. We stick together here." They followed the group through long corridors. The ceilings were much higher than needed for humans. Everything was built for creatures taller and broader than people from Earth. Jake felt like a child walking through a giant's house. Other cadets filled the hallways. Jake saw beings he had only read about in textbooks. The Zentari looked like walking trees with 4 arms. The Kithra had blue skin and moved like dancers. The Velkari towered over everyone else, their red eyes watching the new arrivals with what looked like hunger. "Attention, new meat," boomed a voice that made Jake's bones vibrate. A massive Velkari in a black uniform stepped forward. Scars covered his gray face and metal implants stuck out from his skull. "I am Commander Zethkar. For the next 6 months, your worthless lives belong to me." The commander's eyes swept over the group and stopped on the human cadets. His lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Ah, more soft skins. How wonderful. I do so enjoy watching humans learn what real training means." Jake felt Ryan tense beside him. Some of the other alien cadets stepped away from the humans as if they didn't want to be associated with them. "You will be assigned rooms and uniforms," Commander Zethkar continued. "Training begins at 600 tomorrow. Those who survive the first week might actually learn something useful. Those who don't," he shrugged. "Well, space is vast and uncaring." The cadets were dismissed and led to their quarters. Jake found himself sharing a small room with Ryan. The walls were bare metal and the beds were hard as rocks. A single window looked out at Titan's dark landscape. "He really hates humans," Jake said as he unpacked his things. "All the Velkari instructors do," Ryan replied. "My older brother came through here 2 years ago. He said 3 humans in his class didn't make it through training. What happened to them? Training accidents, they said. Weapons malfunctioned during exercises. Safety systems failed at the worst possible moments. My brother thought it was suspicious, but he couldn't prove anything." That evening, Jake met the other human cadets in the mess hall. There was Lisa Park, a quiet girl from the lunar colonies. Danny Martinez had grown up on a mining station near Mars. Kevin Wang came from one of Earth's underwater cities. All of them looked nervous. The only human instructor was Lieutenant Amy Foster. She was in her late 20s with short black hair and intelligent brown eyes. She sat with the human cadets during dinner, speaking quietly. "Listen carefully," she said. "The next few months will test everything you think you know about yourselves. The Velkari believe humans are weak. They will try to break you in ways that would be considered torture on Earth." "Why don't the other aliens do anything about it?" Lisa asked. "Because most of them agree with the Velkari. Humans are new to the galactic community. We haven't proven ourselves yet. Every species had to earn their place here." "How many humans have died during training?" Jake asked. Lieutenant Foster's face went dark. "Too many. The official records say they died in training accidents. But accidents have a way of happening more often to humans than to other species. Can't we report this to someone?" "To who? The Galactic Council?" "They trust the Velkari to run these facilities. And the Velkari always have explanations for what happens." After dinner, Jake walked through the station's corridors. He wanted to learn the layout, but he also needed to think. The place felt hostile in ways that went beyond the cold metal walls. Security cameras tracked his movement. Velkari guards watched him with barely hidden contempt. He found himself in an observation deck that looked out at the stars. Earth was visible as a tiny blue dot in the distance. It seemed impossibly far away. Having second thoughts, Commander Zethkar's voice made Jake jump. The Velkari commander had appeared behind him without making a sound. "No, sir," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Good, because there's no going home once training begins. Your species volunteered to join the galactic military. Now you get to prove you deserve to wear the uniform." The commander moved closer. His breath smelled like metal and ozone. "I've trained thousands of cadets from dozens of species. You know what I've learned about humans?" "No, sir. You break easily. Your bodies are weak. Your minds are soft. You rely on technology instead of strength. And when things get difficult, you cry for help instead of fighting." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We'll see about that, sir." Commander Zethkar laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "Yes, we will. Training starts tomorrow, Softskin. I hope you're ready to learn what the galaxy really thinks of your species." The commander walked away, leaving Jake alone with the stars. In the distance, Earth looked smaller than ever. But Jake didn't feel scared anymore. He felt determined. Whatever the Velkari threw at him, he would prove that humans belonged here. He didn't know yet that some tests were designed not to measure strength, but to eliminate the competition entirely. He didn't know that tomorrow would begin a chain of events that would shake the foundations of the galactic military system. All he knew was that he was ready to fight for his place among the stars. 3 weeks of training had pushed Jake to his limits. Every morning brought new challenges designed to test the cadets. The Velkari instructors seemed to take special pleasure in making the human cadets work twice as hard as everyone else. Physical training was brutal. The gravity generators were set higher during human exercises. The obstacle courses had been modified to favor taller, stronger species. When humans struggled, the instructors called them weak. When they succeeded, the instructors claimed the tests were too easy. Jake had learned to ignore the insults. Ryan Cooper wasn't handling it as well. His roommate had lost weight and barely slept. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and his hands shook during meals. "They're trying to break us," Ryan said one night as they lay in their beds. "My brother was right. They don't want humans to succeed." "Then we'll prove them wrong," Jake replied, though he was starting to wonder if that was possible. The next morning brought an announcement that chilled Jake's blood. Commander Zethkar stood before the assembled cadets with what might have been a smile on his scarred face. "Today we begin combat simulations," he said. "You will be divided into groups and tested in real battlefield conditions. The weak will be separated from the strong." Jake noticed that all 6 human cadets had been assigned to the same group. Lisa Park looked pale. Danny Martinez kept checking his weapon nervously. Kevin Wang stared straight ahead, trying to look brave. Lieutenant Amy Foster approached their group before they left for the training area. She spoke quietly, her eyes filled with concern. "Stay together down there," she said. "Watch each other's backs. And remember, the safety protocols should prevent any real harm." "Should?" Lisa asked. "Will," Foster corrected quickly, but Jake caught the uncertainty in her voice. The combat simulation took place in the station's lower levels. The area had been designed to look like an alien jungle, complete with artificial trees and simulated weather. Multiple levels connected by bridges and tunnels created a 3-dimensional battlefield. "Your mission is simple," announced Instructor Veltar, a Velkari with silver scars covering his arms. "Survive for 2 hours while automated defense systems hunt you. Work as a team. Use your training. Don't die." The instructor's laugh sent chills down Jake's spine. "The weapons are set to training mode. They will sting, but they won't kill. Unless something goes wrong, of course." The 6 humans entered the simulation area through a metal door that sealed behind them with a final-sounding clang. Emergency lights bathed everything in red shadows. Somewhere in the distance, mechanical sound suggested that the hunting had begun. "Stick to the plan," Ryan said, checking his rifle. "We move through the upper levels, avoid the open areas, and find defensible positions." For the first 30 minutes, everything went according to their training. They moved carefully through the fake jungle, communicating with hand signals. The automated defense systems appeared occasionally, but the humans were able to avoid or disable them without much trouble. Then something changed. Jake was crossing a narrow bridge when the first real plasma bolt seared past his head. The smell of burned ozone filled the air, and the metal railing beside him glowed red hot where the energy had struck. That wasn't a training beam, Danny shouted from below. More weapons opened fire from concealed positions. The plasma bolts were bright white instead of the blue color of training weapons. Where they hit the artificial trees, they left smoking holes. The safety protocols must have malfunctioned, Lisa said, but Jake could hear the fear in her voice. Ryan was moving across an open area when the bolt hit him. There was no warning, no time to dive for cover. The plasma burned through his chest armor like it was made of paper. He fell without making a sound. "Ryan!" Jake screamed, but his friend didn't move. Smoke rose from the hole in his chest. "This isn't a malfunction," Kevin said, his voice tight with panic. "They're trying to kill us." More weapons fired from the shadows. Danny tried to reach Ryan's body, but plasma bolts drove him back. One grazed his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him tumbling into a pit. Jake's training took over. He rolled behind a fallen log and tried to assess the situation. The defense systems were using real weapons, not training gear. Someone had either disabled the safety protocols or had never activated them in the first place. Through his communication headset, he heard voices that made his blood run cold. The instructors were talking to each other, and they didn't know the human comm systems were on the same frequency. "How long do you think the soft skins will last?" That was Instructor Veltar. "The skinny one is already down," replied another voice. "I give the rest maybe 20 minutes. Commander Zethkar wanted to see how they handle real pressure. This should be educational. Jake realized with horrible clarity that this was no accident. The Velkari were using the simulation to murder human cadets, then claiming it was a training mishap. A plasma bolt nearly took his head off, and he rolled away from his hiding spot. Lisa was crouched behind a metal barrier, tears streaming down her face. Kevin was trying to help Danny climb out of the pit, but more weapons kept firing at them. "We have to get out of here," Lisa said through her comm. "The exit is sealed," Kevin replied. "We're trapped until the simulation ends." Jake looked around the artificial jungle with new eyes. The Velkari had built this place to be a death trap, but they had made one mistake. They thought like Velkari, not like humans. The defense systems were positioned to cover all the obvious routes and hiding places. But humans were smaller and more flexible than most galactic species. There were spaces between the walls, gaps in the floor plating, and maintenance shafts that the Velkari hadn't considered. "Follow me," Jake said. "I have an idea." He led the surviving humans through a series of maintenance tunnels that ran behind the simulation area's walls. The passages were barely wide enough for human bodies, but they provided cover from the automated weapons. They reached a central chamber where the simulation's control systems were housed. Jake used his engineering training to hack into the network. What he found there made him sick. The safety protocols hadn't malfunctioned. They had been deliberately shut off. The system logs showed that Commander Zethkar himself had authorized the use of live weapons. But Jake also found something else. The simulation was being recorded from multiple angles. Every moment of the hunt was being preserved as evidence. He quickly copied the files to his personal storage device. Then he restored the safety protocols and activated an emergency shutdown. The automated weapons powered down and the sealed doors opened. When the simulation officially ended an hour later, Jake was the only human still standing. Ryan was dead. Danny had bled out in the pit. Kevin had been hit by a plasma bolt while trying to help Lisa, who had been caught in crossfire. Jake knelt beside Ryan's body as the medical teams arrived. His best friend's eyes stared at nothing, and his chest was a burned ruin. "Training accident," he heard Commander Zethkar explain to someone over the comm. "The humans weren't prepared for advanced combat scenarios. Very sad, but these things happen." Jake's hands clenched into fists. The Velkari thought they had won. They thought they had proven that humans were too weak for military service. They had no idea what they had really done. They had just created something far more dangerous than any human cadet. They had created an enemy who had nothing left to lose. Jake sat in the medical bay, staring at the bandages covering his arms. The plasma burns would heal, but the memories wouldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ryan falling, heard Danny scream, watched Kevin trying to shield Lisa from the deadly fire. "You're lucky to be alive," said Dr. Helen Price, the station's human medical officer. She was one of only 3 humans on the entire facility's staff. "Lucky," Jake repeated. The word tasted bitter. Commander Zethkar entered the medical bay with 2 other Velkari officers. his red eyes fixed on Jake with what might have been disappointment. "Cadet Morrison," the commander said, "I'm sorry for the loss of your teammates. Equipment malfunctions are tragic but sometimes unavoidable in advanced training scenarios." Jake wanted to scream. He wanted to tell the commander that he knew the truth. Instead, he nodded and said, "Yes, sir. The investigation will show that a power surge caused the safety systems to fail. These things happen when we push technology to its limits." "Of course, sir. You'll be given time to recover, then assigned to a new training group. I'm sure you understand that military service involves risks." After the Valkyrie left, Dr. Price continued treating Jake's wounds in silence. But Lieutenant Amy Foster appeared in the doorway, her face pale with anger. "They're lying," she said quietly once she was sure they were alone. "I know," Jake replied. Foster looked surprised. "You know? I accessed the simulation logs before the emergency shutdown. The safety protocols were manually disabled. Commander Zethkar authorized the use of live weapons." Dr. Price stopped working and looked up. "You have proof?" Jake patted his jacket pocket where his data storage device rested. "Everything. Video recordings, system logs, communication records. Enough to prove murder." "Then we have to report this to the Galactic Council," Foster said. "With what authority?" Dr. Price asked. "We're human military personnel stationed on a Valkyrie facility. They'll claim we're lying to protect our own species." "Besides," Jake said, "this isn't the first time. You said yourself that too many humans have died in training accidents." Foster sat down heavily in a nearby chair. 17 human cadets in the past 6 months, all listed as equipment failures or training mishaps. 17, Jake repeated. "How many aliens died in the same period?" 3, and those were actual accidents during high-risk exercises. Jake felt a cold anger settling in his chest. It wasn't the hot rage he had felt during the simulation. This was something deeper and more dangerous. "Show me the files," he said. That night, Lieutenant Foster brought Jake to her quarters. The room was larger than cadet housing but still cramped by human standards. She activated a security screen that would prevent electronic surveillance, then pulled up classified records on her computer. The files painted a picture of systematic murder. Human cadets were consistently assigned to the most dangerous training scenarios. Equipment failures happened to them at rates far above statistical probability, and when humans complained or asked questions, they were often reassigned to even more hazardous exercises. "Look at this," Foster said, pointing to a medical report. "Cadet Brandon Lee died last month when his environmental suit malfunctioned during a spacewalk exercise. But the suit's diagnostic logs show that someone manually triggered the oxygen recycler failure. Can we prove who did it? The access codes trace back to Instructor Veltar. But the official investigation concluded that Cadet Lee had improperly maintained his equipment." Jake studied the files for hours. The pattern was clear, but the evidence was circumstantial. The Valkyrie were careful to make everything look like accidents or human incompetence. "There's something else," Foster said. "I've been monitoring restricted communications. The Valkyrie are planning something big." She pulled up intercepted data streams showing construction projects in the station's lower levels. Massive amounts of exotic matter were being moved into a secure facility deep in the station's core. "What is it?" Jake asked. "I'm not sure. The project is classified above my clearance level, but the energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they're building down there, it's not a training facility." Jake stared at the schematic displays. The construction looked like a weapon of some kind, but the scale was enormous. The power requirements alone suggested something capable of affecting planetary bodies. "This is why they're killing the human cadets," he realized. "They don't want witnesses to whatever they're building, or they're eliminating humans before they reveal this weapon to the galaxy," Foster said. "A preemptive strike against the species most likely to oppose them." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Titan's surface stretched out below, lifeless and cold. Somewhere out there, Ryan's body was being prepared for shipment back to Earth. His family would be told that their son died serving his species with honor. "What are our options?" he asked. "Officially? None. We can file reports, but they'll be buried or dismissed. We can request transfers, but the Valkyrie control who leaves this station." "Unofficially?" Foster was quiet for a long moment. "We gather enough evidence to expose everything, or we find a way to stop whatever they're planning. How? I don't know. But you survived something that was designed to kill you. That gives you advantages the Valkyrie don't expect." Jake thought about the simulation, about how he had used maintenance tunnels and system exploits to stay alive. The Velkari were powerful and technologically advanced, but they thought in rigid patterns. They expected enemies to fight according to established rules. Humans didn't always follow the rules. "I need to see the weapon they're building," Jake said. "That's impossible. The core facility is restricted to senior officers only. The security systems would detect any unauthorized access. Not if I don't trigger the security systems." Foster looked at him with growing understanding. "You want to use the maintenance shafts again?" The Velkari built this station for their own use. They didn't consider that smaller species might have advantages in confined spaces. "I can get to places they can't reach and wouldn't think to guard. It's suicide. Even if you reach the core facility, what then?" Jake touched the data storage device in his pocket. "Then I gather evidence that even the Galactic Council can't ignore. And maybe I find a way to make sure this never happens to another human cadet." Foster stared at him for a long moment. "You're not just talking about gathering evidence, are you? They murdered my friends. They've murdered 17 other humans, and they're planning something that could threaten the entire galaxy." Jake turned back to the window. In the reflection, he could see something new in his own eyes. The frightened cadet who had arrived 3 weeks ago was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who had learned that the galaxy was a cruel place where only the strong survived. But the Velkari had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that humans were weak because they were kind. They didn't understand that kindness and strength weren't opposites. They were about to learn the difference. Jake spent the next week studying the station's layout. He memorized maintenance schedules, guard rotations, and security protocols. The Velkari thought he was recovering from trauma, but he was actually planning a war. His first target was the station's communication array. If he was going to expose the truth, he needed to make sure his evidence would reach the outside galaxy. The array was located in a restricted section, but Jake had found an approach route through the air recycling system. He waited until the night shift, when most of the station operated on minimal crew. The ventilation shafts were cramped even for human standards, but they provided access to areas that the Velkari considered secure. The communication array's control room was empty, except for automated systems. Jake plugged his data storage device into the main console and began uploading files to a secure server on Earth. The transmission would take hours to complete, but once it started, it couldn't be stopped without destroying the entire array. While the files uploaded, Jake accessed the station's internal communication logs. What he found made his blood run cold. The Velkari weren't just eliminating human cadets at this facility. Similar accidents were happening at training stations across the galaxy. The scope of the conspiracy was larger than he had imagined. The Velkari were systematically removing humans from military service, preparing for something that required the elimination of potential opposition. Jake set up a delayed transmission that would broadcast the evidence to every major news network in human space. Even if something happened to him, the truth would eventually come out. His next target was the station's security system. The Velkari relied on automated defenses to control access to sensitive areas, but the security computer had been built using components from dozens of different worlds, including some human technology. Jake had grown up on a space station where his father worked as a systems engineer. He knew human coding protocols better than most aliens realized. The security system's human-built components had backdoors that the original programmers had included for maintenance purposes. Over the next 3 nights, Jake used these backdoors to create holes in the station's defenses. He programmed maintenance drones to malfunction in specific ways, causing the Velkari to focus their attention on false emergencies. He rerouted power from non-critical systems, creating brownouts that would mask his activities. Most importantly, he gained access to the personnel files and discovered something that changed everything. Commander Zethkar wasn't just following orders. He was running an experimental program designed to test new methods of eliminating inferior species from military service. The human cadets weren't just casualties. They were test subjects. Jake's anger transformed into something colder and more focused. The Velkari wanted to see how humans responded to systematic elimination. He would show them exactly what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. He began his assault on the station's infrastructure with surgical precision. Critical systems began failing in ways that looked accidental, but created maximum disruption. The environmental controls started producing random temperature fluctuations. Gravity generators developed intermittent problems that left entire sections of the station floating in 0G for hours at a time. The Velkari security forces were trained to deal with external threats, not internal sabotage. They had protocols for repelling boarding parties and defending against space attacks, but they didn't know how to fight an enemy who understood their own systems better than they did. Jake struck from the shadows, always staying one step ahead of their response. When they reinforced security in one area, he had already moved to another. When they tried to track his movements through the surveillance system, he had already looped the cameras to show empty corridors. The maintenance tunnels became his highway through the station. He could move from section to section without being detected, striking at targets and disappearing before the Velkari knew what had happened. On the fourth night of his campaign, Jake encountered his first direct opposition. Instructor Veltar was inspecting a damaged power relay when Jake emerged from a ventilation shaft behind him. The Velkari was faster and stronger than any human, but Jake had advantages that his enemy didn't expect. He was smaller, more flexible, and fighting for more than just victory. He was fighting for justice. The battle was brief and brutal. Veltar's superior strength meant nothing in the confined space of the maintenance area. Jake used the Velkari's size against him, leading him into a narrow corridor where the alien couldn't use his reach advantage. When it was over, Veltar lay unconscious among the wreckage of his own equipment. Jake took the instructor's access codes and identification, then left him tied up where the security teams would eventually find him. But Jake's real target wasn't the station's infrastructure or its personnel. It was the mysterious weapon hidden in the core facility. Every night he moved closer to the station's heart, mapping defenses and identifying weaknesses. The core facility was protected by multiple layers of security. Force fields, automated sentries, and gravity wells created a maze of death for anyone trying to approach without authorization. But the Velkari had made the same mistake they always made. They had designed their defenses to stop enemies who fought like Velkari. Jake spent hours studying the security patterns, looking for the kind of weakness that only human ingenuity could exploit. The answer came from an unexpected source: the station's waste management system. The core facility generated enormous amounts of heat that had to be dissipated to prevent a meltdown. The cooling system used liquid nitrogen that was recycled through a network of pipes running throughout the station. These pipes were too small for Velkari to use, but a human could navigate them if he was willing to risk freezing to death. Jake modified his environmental suit to handle the extreme cold, then entered the cooling system through a maintenance access point. The journey to the core facility was a nightmare of sub-zero temperatures and cramped spaces, but it brought him to the one place the Velkari had never thought to guard. When he finally emerged into the core facility's main chamber, Jake found himself looking at something that defied comprehension. The weapon wasn't just a planet killer. It was a gravitational manipulator capable of tearing apart the very fabric of space-time. The device filled the entire chamber, a twisted mass of exotic matter contained within force fields that bent light around them. Energy readings showed power levels that could destabilize entire star systems. But Jake also discovered something else. The weapon was still under construction, and its control systems used the same human-built components that he had already learned to exploit. The Velkari had made their final mistake. They had built their ultimate weapon using technology they didn't fully understand. Jake smiled grimly as he began uploading new code into the weapon's control systems. The Velkari wanted to eliminate humanity from the galaxy. Instead, they were about to learn why underestimating humans was the most dangerous mistake any species could make. The countdown to their downfall had begun. Jake stared at the massive gravitational weapon in horror and fascination. The device pulsed with barely contained energy, its exotic matter core twisting space around it in ways that hurt to look at directly. According to the technical specifications, it could create gravitational anomalies powerful enough to tear planets apart. But as Jake studied the control systems, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The weapon hadn't been designed just to destroy enemy worlds. The power output reading showed it could also be used to create artificial gravity wells, the kind that could trap entire fleets in space. The Velkari weren't planning to eliminate humanity through assassinations alone. They were preparing to trap human ships and colonies, then destroy them all at once. Jake's hands shook as he accessed the weapon's targeting system. The coordinates were already programmed: Earth, Luna, Mars. Every major human settlement in the galaxy was marked for destruction. The attack was scheduled to begin in less than 48 hours. Jake forced himself to think clearly despite the rage burning in his chest. He could try to disable the weapon, but the Valkyrie would just repair it. He could steal the targeting data, but that wouldn't stop them from reprogramming it. There was only one way to ensure this weapon never threatened humanity or any other species. He had to turn it against the station itself. Jake began reprogramming the gravitational manipulator's control systems, using his knowledge of human engineering protocols to bypass the Valkyrie security measures. The weapon's exotic matter core could be reconfigured to create an implosion rather than an explosion. Instead of projecting gravitational force outward, it would collapse inward, taking the entire station with it. The work was delicate and dangerous. One mistake would either trigger the weapon prematurely or cause a gravitational cascade that could affect Titan itself. Jake had to balance the exotic matter containment fields perfectly, creating a controlled collapse that would destroy the station without threatening the moon's surface. As he worked, alarms began sounding throughout the facility. His sabotage campaign had finally pushed the Valkyrie security forces to full alert. He could hear boots running through the corridors above as search teams spread out to find the intruder. Security teams to level 7. Commander Zethkar's voice echoed through the communications system. The human cadet is somewhere in the restricted areas. Find him and bring him to me alive. Jake smiled grimly as he continued his programming. Let them search the upper levels. By the time they realized where he was, it would be too late. But the Valkyrie were more cunning than he had given them credit for. As Jake finished the final calculations for the gravitational implosion, the chamber's main door exploded inward. Commander Zethkar strode through the wreckage, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. Step away from the controls, soft skin, the commander ordered. His red eyes glowed with fury and his claws extended from his fingertips. You have caused enough trouble. Jake kept his hands on the control panel. I know what this weapon is for. I know about the planned attack on human colonies. Of course you do. We never intended to keep it secret from your species. We wanted you to know that resistance was futile. Why? Humans have never threatened the Valkyrie. Commander Zethkar laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your species is a virus, human. You spread across the galaxy, making friends with other races, sharing technology, building alliances. You make them weak with your talk of cooperation and peace. So you decided to eliminate us. We decided to show the galaxy what happens to species that refuse to accept their proper place in the natural order. The strong rule, the weak serve. It has always been this way. Jake felt the weight of his data storage device in his pocket. Even if he died here, the evidence would eventually reach the galactic community. But would it be enough to prevent future atrocities? The irony is delicious, Commander Zethkar continued. You came here believing you could prove that humans belonged in the galactic military. Instead, you have proven that your species is too dangerous to be allowed to survive. Dangerous how? Look around you, Cadet. You have crippled this station using nothing but cleverness and determination. You have accessed systems that should have been impossible for a human to breach. You have fought a guerrilla war against superior forces and won. The commander stepped closer, his claws clicking against the metal floor. If one human cadet can cause this much damage, imagine what your entire species could accomplish if they ever decided to oppose us. Jake understood then. The Valkyrie weren't eliminating humans because they were weak. They were eliminating them because they were strong in ways the Valkyrie couldn't counter. You're afraid of us, Jake said. We are cautious. There is a difference. Commander Zethkar gestured to his guards. Kill him. Jake's finger was already on the activation control. The gravitational weapon powered up with a sound like reality tearing. The exotic matter core began to collapse inward, its containment fields inverting to create a gravitational singularity. What have you done? Commander Zethkar roared. I've given you exactly what you wanted, Jake replied. A demonstration of what humans are capable of. The station shuddered as space-time began to warp around the collapsing exotic matter. Emergency klaxons screamed throughout the facility as gravitational forces started tearing at the station's structure. Commander Zethkar lunged forward, but Jake was already moving. He rolled under the alien's claws and sprinted toward a maintenance shaft that led to the station's shuttle bay. Behind him, the Valkyrie guards fired their weapons, but the gravitational distortions bent their plasma bolts into impossible curves. The station was coming apart around them. Metal groaned and twisted as gravitational forces stressed the superstructure beyond its limits. Sections of corridor collapsed as the artificial gravity failed and fluctuated wildly. Jake reached the shuttle bay as the first major hull breaches occurred. Emergency force fields activated to prevent total decompression, but they wouldn't hold for long. He found a Valkyrie patrol craft and used Instructor Veltar's access codes to override the launch controls. As his stolen ship lifted off from the dying station, Jake activated his final surprise. The delayed transmission he had programmed days earlier began broadcasting to every communication relay in the system. Video evidence of the human cadets' murders, records of the conspiracy to eliminate humanity, and technical specifications of the gravitational weapon flooded the galactic communication networks. The truth spread faster than light, jumping from relay to relay across the galaxy. Within hours, every major world would know what the Valkyrie had planned. Behind him, the research station collapsed into the artificial singularity he had created. The gravitational weapon that was supposed to destroy human worlds became the instrument of its creator's downfall. Metal and flesh alike were crushed to atomic particles as the station imploded. Commander Zethkar's final transmission reached Jake's ship just before the communications array was destroyed. "You think you have won, human, but you have only proven that your species is too dangerous to exist. Others will continue what we started." "Let them try," Jake replied, though he knew the commander could no longer hear him. The gravitational collapse reached critical mass and then stabilized, leaving behind a small but stable singularity where the station had been. Jake set course for the nearest human military base, his evidence ready to present to the Galactic Council. As Earth grew larger in his view screen, Jake thought about Ryan Cooper and the other cadets who had died. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. The galaxy would know the truth about the Valkyrie conspiracy, and humanity would finally have the chance to prove itself on equal terms. But Jake also knew this was just the beginning. The Valkyrie had allies, and they would not give up easily. Humanity had won this battle by refusing to fight according to their enemies' rules. The war for the galaxy's future was just beginning, and humans would fight it the only way they knew how. With courage, ingenuity, and the absolute refusal to surrender in the face of impossible odds. In the depths of space, the artificial singularity that had once been a Valkyrie research station pulsed with dark energy, a monument to the price of underestimating humanity. The galaxy would never make that mistake again.